Right, good evening everybody. It's 6 o'clock, so welcome to this evening's Rushcliffe Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch your microphones off when you are not speaking and also to switch them on when you are speaking. So thank you for that. So for the formalities, I'm Councillor Richard Butler, the Chairman of the committee, and with me is Councillor Tony Wells, the Vice Chairman. And officers this evening, we have Mrs. Knott, who is Service Manager for Planning, Mrs. Dodd, who is Planning Manager Development, Mr. Sharman, who is Team Manager, Mr. Hilton, Senior Planning Officer, Mr. Hall, Area Planning Officer, and Mrs. Walker, the Borough Solicitor. So we will go into the first item on the agenda. First of all, we have apologies for absence, please. Thank you very much. And item 2 is if we have any declarations of interest from anyone. I will, it's not so much a declaration of interest, but the second item on the agenda, Rushcliffe Oaks, because I'm one of the ward members, I will stand down for that item, as seems to be the form that we tend to follow at the moment. So it's not really a declaration of interest as such, but just to inform colleagues that I'll be standing down for that item. So we go on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held way back on the 9th of November. So for those of us who were here, and are we happy that they're correct? Yes, all happy. Thank you very much. I'll just. Oh, sorry, Councillor Redivine.
Yeah, just this might be pedantic, but actually you said November, it was December. But under apologies, we've said due to unforeseen circumstances, and actually the circumstances were known because there was a big traffic problem that night. And if people are late because of something known like that, could it at least be recorded so that it doesn't? I don't know. I don't think it needs to be changed on this occasion, but could we in the future, if there's something specific, note the fact that it was specific?
I don't see why not. I think that because it does look rather dramatic, doesn't it, when you see it due to unforeseen circumstances. It could have been anything. But I well remember that evening well because of the traffic jams everywhere, and it was complete chaos locally, wasn't it? So perhaps if we're happy not to sort of make a fuss or change those minutes, but certainly bear it in mind for the future. In my defence for referring to the 9th of November, you're quite right, it was the 9th of December. The reason I said the 9th of November is because on these very helpful notes that we put in front of me, it does indeed say the 9th of November, and I didn't spot that. So thank you. So the actual meeting was actually held on Thursday the 14th of December. So with that that correction in mind, we're all happy that they're correct. So I should have double checked the script against the minutes, shouldn't I? So the minutes are signed. Which takes us now into the main reasons we're here this evening. We have 2 applications to discuss and decide this evening, and the first one is Foss Paddock, Nottingham Road, Cropwell Bishop. This is the single-storey extension to existing holiday accommodation to create single accessible holiday lets. And Mr. Sharman, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So, yes, first application for tonight, Foss Paddock, Nottingham Road, Cropwell Bishop, and it's single-storey extension to existing holiday accommodations to create a single accessible holiday let. Just to draw to members' attention, there was one late representation for this from Councillor Birch, which was further comments in support of the application. There were no further officer comments on those. So in relation to the application site itself, it relates to a 1980s bungalow with an associated detached outbuilding, which over time has become used as 4 holiday lets. The site is about 1 mile to the west of Cropwell Bishop, and it's close to the junction of Nottingham Road and the A46. So the A46, you can see to the left-hand side of the image there, the Nottingham Road to the north of the site outlined in red. There's a petrol filling station and services to the western boundary, which you'll see further on images later. And to the northeast, you've got agricultural development, including grain store, poultry farm, and an associated agricultural workers dwelling. And yes, further to the west again, you've got the A46, which is on a raised embankment and a bridge in that particular location. So just to take you to the existing property and building. So these are the elevations of the existing building. And on the bottom on the floor plan there, you can see that it's currently used as 4 self-contained holiday lets with parking to the front. The scheme before you tonight is the extension to the north side of the building, which is in this location here. It would be a minimum of 3.7 metres, which is this distance here, to the northern boundary of the site. The extension size is about 7.95 by 9.795. It's 2.4 metres to eaves and 4 metres to ridge. The intention of the scheme is to create a further accessible holiday let, which could be used either as an additional unit in itself or could be used in tandem with one of the existing units, where you can see there's a doorway which links into one of them. The extension itself, as you can see on the elevations here, would be built out of brick and clad in timber to the front and to the side elevations, with brickwork to the rear. You can also see it slightly set down and set back from the existing built form, which is on the left-hand side of the image in front of you. So just to take you on a walk around the site, this is to the north of the site. This is the current access off of the old Nottingham Road, and you can see the driveway there. Moving around to the driveway, it's actually to the left of the driveway. The old Nottingham Road has been diverted and stopped up, which is why the concrete bollards are there. Moving into the site, on the left-hand side of that left image, you've got the existing bungalow, and you can see the large driveway. Moving further in, you've got the existing holiday lets there in the centre of the image. The extension proposed to the right-hand side of those existing holiday lets. The left-hand image is the right-hand side where the extension is proposed. The right-hand side image is the other side of the existing holiday lets. No further extensions are proposed on that side of the building. And to the left, you can see a carport/garage, which is associated to the bungalow, not the holiday let use. Just some further photos of the existing site. Moving back out of the site, this is as you come back towards the access from the roundabout. So you can see to the left-hand side of the left image is where the access into the holiday let site is, over here. And then looking in the alternative direction, the right-hand image is looking towards the service filling station. And moving further around, again, you've got another image here, the car park of the petrol filling station. And behind the red car there is where the access to the site is. Another image further around to the right, you can see the building there behind the car park. That is the existing holiday let building. This is moving round to the southeast of the site, to the east of the site, sorry. And this is on the old Nottingham Road where it's been stopped up. That's looking up the old Nottingham Road. And although not very good on this screen here, that's where the current Nottingham Road is, and you can see it going up the escarpment. This is a view from Nottingham Road as it currently stands. You can see the old alignment there running through where the hedge isn't there anymore, and that's the drive to the property. The bungalow itself, you can see to the left-hand side of this image here. And then the other vantage point is from a public footpath to the southeast of the site, which runs across agricultural fields. And again, you can see the bungalow in the centre of the image there, and some associated surrounding development there to the left-hand side. So the main considerations for members tonight are principle of development, green belt, design and amenity, and highways. In relation to this, the principle of expanding an existing tourist accommodation is considered acceptable in principle, whilst it is an unsustainable location as it's outside any specific settlement boundary. As an existing and established facility, your officers are content that the principle of expanding this existing business is acceptable. From a design point of view, the design would be set down and subservient in terms of its roof form and building form, and the timber cladding would differentiate the form to create a more secondary appearance, and accordingly the design of the extension will be considered acceptable. In terms of residential amenities, there are no residential neighbours to the site and as such no associated amenity concerns. And for future occupiers, as a holiday let, they would be short-term lets, and as such, whilst they would be less sensitive to the surrounding uses of the site. As such, there are no associated concerns. From a highways perspective, the site is served by an existing access and the drive is of sufficient size to accommodate the additional vehicle demands. The final point is to look at the green belt of the site. So the site is within designated green belt land. The government attaches great importance to green belts. The fundamental aim of green belt policy is to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. And the essential characteristics of green belts are their openness and their permanence. Local authorities should regard the construction of any new building as inappropriate in the green belt, except for in certain exceptions. One of these exceptions is where it's an extension or alteration of a building, but only provided it does not result in disproportionate additions over and above the size of the original building. Rushcliffe has a long-established 50% volume guideline for disproportionate additions, and this is established in case law. Just to run you through the history of this site, on this plan here, the red highlighted area is the original 1980s garage and store constructed at the same time as the building. So that is the original structure. When it was first converted to a kindergarten in 1989, this extension was added here in orange. And then when it was converted to holiday lets, which was in 2016, this further extension in blue was added. This means that the existing volume of the building is 45% increase over the original building. That's as it stands before any further extensions. When calculated with the further extension currently under consideration today, it amounts to a 114% increase in volume over the original structure. As such, it doesn't fall within the exception of an extension or alteration to a building because it would be disproportionate. As such, the NPPF national policy advises us that inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the greenbelt and it should not be approved except for in very special circumstances. Local authorities should ensure that substantial weight, my emphasis, is given to any harm to the greenbelt. And very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the greenbelt by reason of its inappropriateness and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. The applicant tonight has put forward very special circumstances which relate to the support of tourism, leisure and rural growth with the associated economic benefits, as well as the provision of accommodation suitable for a range of end users. Your officers have considered this carefully as set out on page 14 of the committee report. In summary, the benefits of the scheme must be weighed against the harm to the greenbelt and any other harms arising. In terms of the greenbelt harm, the extension would represent inappropriate development, by definition harmful, with the scheme resulting in a degree of impact on openness to the greenbelt, given the encroachment of built form within the countryside, which are contrary to the 5 purposes of the greenbelt. The changes proposed are permanent, and they would be and whilst well screened, the changes would be perceptible. No other harms have, however, been identified. In summary, the proposed development is inappropriate development and therefore harmful. Substantial weight must be attached to that harm. Against the totality of harm, the above factors relating to the support of tourism, leisure, rural growth and economic benefits and the provision of accommodation suitable for a range of end users have weigh in support of the scheme. It is not, however, considered by officers that these factors would together represent very special circumstances that would clearly outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt. As such, the application before you tonight is recommended for refusal as set out on page 15 of the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sharman. We have two speakers for this application. We have the applicant's agent, Mr. Machin, and we'll also have one of the ward members, Councillor Birch. So, Mr. Machin, if you'd like to come to the desk there, just so you know the way it works, you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Excuse me, and if you're still speaking at 4.5 minutes, then we'll just let you know there's 30 seconds left. And as soon as you're ready, press the right-hand button, the red light will come on, and we'll listen to your representation. Thank you.
Chair, the Council's policies support the retention and expansion of existing tourist accommodation where it would not be detrimental to the surrounding area. The principle of improving and increasing the provision of overnight accommodation within the countryside is supported. The Council has recently supported the proposed use of Greenbelt land for new tourist-related development. The glamping site along Melton Road in Stanton-on-the-Wolds was an undeveloped piece of greenfield, Greenbelt land and is now Birdholm Glamping, an established provider of luxury accommodation. There's also land west of Thirlby Lane, south of Stanton-on-the-Wolds, again formerly undeveloped paddocks located wholly within the Greenbelt and now with planning permission for permanent glamping pods alongside a winery and supporting activities. I can provide the application references to members if necessary. We acknowledge, as we must, that each application must be considered on its own merits. However, these are nearby and real-life examples where the Council has successfully supported new tourist development in Greenbelt locations for the betterment of the borough. The application before you tonight at Foss Paddocks, Crockwell Bishop, is not undeveloped land. It falls within the Greenbelt, yes, but it is instead already well-established tourist accommodation. The applicant has, since 2015, worked very hard to develop her own sustainable rural business. Previously used as a kindergarten, the site now provides 4 self-catered holiday lets. The existing accommodation is popular and caters for all kinds of people of varying ages and backgrounds. This application, if granted, will allow the applicant to offer a larger holiday let suitable for a disabled person and their carer. There is a noticeable lack of overnight accommodation available on the rural edge of Rushcliffe, and this proposal would cater for the needs of disabled people, providing affordable short stay accommodation. The applicant has paddocks where Shetland ponies graze that are available for guests to brush, feed and care for. Guests with Down syndrome regularly stay on the site, and the proposal has been designed to suit their specific needs. This application proposes only a single apartment, but it would be fully accessible and has been designed so that both the disabled guest and their carer can stay in the same apartment. Unfortunately, it's not practical or often safe for people with special needs and carers to stay in separate rooms. They need to be in the same one, and this proposal provides a solution. There's various examples amongst professional papers which support the provision of tourist accommodation for disabled individuals, helping to address issues of loneliness and isolation. This site offers a safe, inclusive environment with countryside views and ponies to pet, and there is clearly established precedent for the council supporting private holiday accommodation despite a Greenbelt location. Planning policies encourage economic development and the provision of tourist facilities. Policies promote rural diversification and the creation and retention of jobs in the rural area. Furthermore, the council has recently stated that the development of new tourism attractions or expansion thereof, including the provision of new accommodation for overnight stays, constitute very special circumstances in Greenbelt terms. The site is totally enclosed by very tall hedgerows. The site can't be seen from public view. From the site photographs earlier, you can appreciate that the small extension proposed by the applicant would cause no harm to the Greenbelt. The site has very large commercial development, petrol station and a large farm adjacent to it, and the proposal would be small scale with minimal visual impact. The provision of tourist accommodation for disabled individuals, especially those with Down syndrome and their carers, the creation of wider tourism opportunities, the opportunity for rural growth and diversification. These are overriding factors which should weigh heavily in the planning balance. The social and economic benefits of the proposal clearly and demonstrably outweigh the planning harm. The entirely screened nature of this site, its discrete setting amongst significant other development, also contribute to the very special circumstances that outweigh any possible harm to Greenbelt. The application received no objection from local residents. Cropwell Bishop Parish Council do not object. Copgrave Town Council do not object. All 3 ward councillors do not object, one of whom speaks in support of the proposal tonight. This small extension would have no noticeable effect on the character or openness of the area, but it would have a meaningful impact on the lives of disabled people, young adults with special needs and their devoted carers. The scheme would also make an important contribution to economic growth in the rural area. We hope members will support the application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Machen, just in your 5 minutes, so well done for that, thank you. And our next speaker on this is one of the ward members, Councillor Birch, please. So again, you've got up to 5 minutes.
Sorry, thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. I'd like to preface my remarks by stating that I fully agree with the concept of the Green Belt. We need to prevent urban sprawl and protect the character and openness of the countryside. That is without a doubt. However, we need to balance this with the needs of the local area and be flexible enough to allow sensible developments where it is needed and where it brings large benefits that outweigh any potential harm to the Green Belt. This is such a case. This application proposes to add a fantastic amenity to Rushcliffe where it is badly needed. The application, as we've heard, is for a small additional holiday apartment, which is specifically designed for disabled visitors and their carers. There is very little by way of overnight accommodation in South East Rushcliffe. There is even less overnight accommodation for disabled visitors and their carers. Providing these facilities is clearly of benefit to the local area, both socially and economically. As I've said in my comments, the site is immediately adjacent to 2,000 square foot, 2,000 square meters of concrete hardstanding, complete with a petrol station and a Greggs on it. It's a stone's throw away from 4 large poultry buildings, large silos and other large industrial buildings, which are sited across the road. Further, the slip road for the A46 is located just 70 metres from the proposed site. Any impact on the green belt will be utterly negligible when you consider the large amount of development already around the site. Further, the new building will be screened by 9-foot hedges and cannot be seen from the road. It will not impact on the openness of the countryside whatsoever. Most residents in the surrounding area won't know it's there. It's important to note that the rolling fields and beautiful views behind the main residence remain utterly undisturbed by the proposed building, which backs onto the existing petrol station and Greggs site. This proposal is sensible and proportional, with many benefits which clearly outweigh any harm to the green belt. As Mr. Macon has said, there is copious peer-reviewed medical literature that shows the benefits to people with certain disabilities of interacting with nature and with animals. Indeed, the current Mayor of Rushcliffe's chosen charity espouses these values. Providing disabled accommodation in this beautiful rural setting will allow many more disabled guests to visit our countryside and benefit from it. This proposal is nothing but positive. It will bring benefits to the local economy, tourism, as well as benefits to disabled visitors to our countryside. It makes our borough more accessible and welcoming. I hope that you agree with me that this brings massive benefits to the local area, which far outweighs the impacts on the Greenbelt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. So we heard from Mr. Machin, who's the agent. He is pointing out that supporting the tourism he says tourism is not detrimental to Greenbelt. He referred to some other sites in Rushcliffe at Stanton on the Wolds where glamping sites have recently been given permission. The existing tourist business is well established and is a local business, is popular with people of all ages, and referred to disabled facilities and the need for additional disabled facilities, and just told us that it's a single apartment, and some of the other aspects such as the rural diversification, and it's shielded from the road and not in public view, and pointed out again there's been no local objections from public or local parish councils. And we also heard from Councillor Birch, who, although he agrees very much with the concept of the green belt, He considers that balance needs to be brought into cases like this and weigh up the benefits and harm. And Councillor Birch is of the opinion that this is not harm to Greenbelt policy, and pointed out the use of the proposal, and pointed out the fact that nearby or next door there's a petrol station, Greggs, and the poultry farm. Considers impact on Greenbelt is negligible and not seen from the road, and is of the opinion that it won't be seen from the public realm from the road, and he thinks it's sensible and proportional. So I think that's covered most of the points that the speakers said in favour. Mr. Sharman, do you want to come back on any of those, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of those. There was reference in Mr. Mason's comment to applications in Stanton-on-the-Wolds for glamping accommodation. That is correct. We have found very special circumstances for glamping accommodation at 2 sites in Stanton-on-the-Wolds. The key difference between those applications and the one before you tonight is that those applications were for glamping accommodation that is not permanent, and it can be removed, and it's removed controlled by condition. That it shall be removed once the use ceases. So it is not a permanent change to the Greenbelt, unlike the scheme before you tonight, which is permanent in its nature. The other point was just a matter where it was suggested that there was no harm. I just remind members that if the development does not fall within an exception to inappropriate development is by definition harmful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. So we're open to discussion, debate and decision. So first hand I see is Councillor Calvert.
Right. Thank you, Chair. I think this development has a lot going for it, to be honest. The only obstacle seems to be the issue about volume that's raised in the report in paragraph 33. It would be helpful for me to make my point if we had the slide up that has the original, the existing, and then the proposed development.
Yes, we can do that. We'll just fiddle to get the computer reset.
Thank you. So when I went on my site visit, I was comparing the original plus the extensions to what was being proposed. And if you do that and you do the calculation as you've done in paragraph 33, you would have an increase of 47.5%, which is less than the 50. So I would like to explain to me why we have to go back to the original to do the calculation and assess the impact.
Thank you. I suspect it's a technicality, and I'm sure that will be explained to us. So if you could pick up on that, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So it's a definition within the National Planning Policy Framework. So the way it's worded is the exception is extensions or alterations of a building provided that it does not result in disproportionate additions over and above the size of the original building. So the term original is later defined as the building as it existed in 1948, if it was built before then, or as originally constructed, if built after then. So it's the terminology in the NPPF that draws us back.
Is that helpful? Do you want to come back on that, or are you still thinking?
It's not helpful for those people who are trying to promote the development, but I can't argue against what's written in NPPF.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Chaplin, please.
Thank you. Can I just ask planning, in paragraph 42, it says that there was, or there could have been an opportunity for the applicant to amend the proposal to something that would be acceptable. Can I just ask what that amendment might be?
I think there were discussions during the application about whether a smaller extension that would be closer to 50% volume could be combined with an existing unit to provide an accessible unit. So whether that was an option for them that was more compliant with Greenbelt policy. So that was a discussion that went on.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on that, or just okay? Councillor Rector, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Yeah, I'm with the officer insofar as that I would consider the proposal to constitute inappropriate development on the basis of the, as Councillor Calvert as questioned in relation to the, it does not appear to me to be a disproportionate, less than a disproportionate addition. Sorry, my words are not coming out in the right order. So then, next step, therefore, to think about the very special circumstances that exist. Those appear to me to centre on the ways in which the accommodation could or would be specifically suitable for particular types of users. And I've got a couple of questions arising from that. One of them might be unfair because it probably isn't for the officers to answer, but I think it's relevant anyway, which is around the provision of what's there already. If I've understood that that's single story and potentially accessible for the types of users that we're hearing about today. And I suppose the second one, which might be more relevant or easier to answer, is specifically in which ways is the proposed development specifically designed to cater for people for the types of users that we've heard about.
So two questions there. Are you clear with those?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in relation to the second question, first, obviously the applicant has designed the proposal that they've put forward to us. We've not made our own assessment as to what standards it has been constructed. If I pull up the application plans and put those back on the screen, bear with me a second. So I believe if you look at the plan, there's suggestions in terms of manoeuvring space around the accommodation. It would appear, looking at that, there isn't any more detailed information as to exactly what standards it has been constructed or what design process it's gone through that officers are aware of, but it's obviously been put forward on the basis of it being accessible accommodation. And in relation to the first question, I wasn't quite sure, Councillor Walker, what obviously the existing accommodation was permitted and converted previously.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to understand is, from my understanding, potentially the strongest argument for the existence of very special circumstances is to provide a type of accommodation that's suitable for people with special needs, disabilities, and their carers. I'm trying to understand exactly how what's proposed delivers that to a greater degree than what is already there. Because if what is already there is suitable for those users, and we heard that quite a lot of those users use what's there already, then perhaps that doesn't go to the very special circumstances argument quite as much as we've heard. And that's the bit that I'm trying to scrutinise, because found harm, trying to look at what the very special circumstances are and see how that holds up.
So that's probably not a question that officers can provide an answer to.
Strictly speaking, no, I'm afraid not. No. Yeah. Okay.
Can I just make a relevant point to the question, please?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Thank you. If you look on the plan, if you could make it a bit bigger like I have on my screen, you'll see what the difference is. So there's considerably more room for a person in a wheelchair to use. There are 2 accessible bathrooms and toilets. There you can actually see that it's an accessible toilet because there are room for bars and things. There is not that in the other accommodation. There's a great deal more room for manoeuvrability around the beds and around the bath and the toilets. So, and in the dining and living area. So I do think that it is very different, and you can see that just by looking at the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallender, for pointing those out, and hopefully that's been some help to Councillor Walker. My next speaker on the list is Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions, really. The speakers said quite a lot about need for this type of accommodation. Was any evidence provided to show how much accommodation there is and what the need is, you know, in the area for more of this sort of accommodation? My second question is about location, really, in terms of a tourism business. It certainly doesn't strike me initially as a sort of tourist area. I was wondering how that too compared to those glamping sites. It's accommodation, certainly, but is it tourism? Is this, you know, what Rushcliffe tourism looks like? Units next to a roundabout and a main road with a chicken farm across the road. So that was the other question. The other question I have, in terms of the accessibility, is what's the surfacing of the car park and so on, because it looked like gravel to me, and has that been considered? Thank you.
Thank you. I think the point I'd pick up on is it a tourism area? I think if you look at anywhere really, the places like, I mean, a travel lodge somewhere may not necessarily be in the most attractive of places, but it could still be regarded as a tourism area, could it not? But there again, it's all down to the individual appearance and use of the local area. But again, it's down to perception and understanding. But could you pick up on Councillor Thomas's other points, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the first point, evidence of need, that there wasn't any specific need assessment or demand assessment in support of the application. So it's to be assessed on its merits. In relation to tourism, the tourism policy, tourism and leisure policy, also refers to overnight accommodation. So it's overnight accommodation in this particular matter and point. And in relation to the surfacing, as the photograph on screen shows, it is a gravel surface to the existing car parking area. Thank you.
Is that helpful, Councillor Thomas? Okay, Councillor Edivine, please.
Obviously, this is an existing business. I actually completely get the fact, you know, when you compare it with glamping sites, they're not permanent. This is permanent, and I've been arguing for some time that basically any permanent building in the Greenbelt could become a house eventually, and that's current planning law, which I wish it wasn't. Do you look at, and I know I know we're taking this as an application on its merit, but I can remember an application in Keyworth, which was a stud farm, where they were able to demonstrate the viability of the business, if you like. So do you actually look at the economic viability of the business as part of the planning process? In other words, is it a well-used amenity, or is it something, if it fell into disrepair, someone might turn around and say, oh, we could turn that into a house?
So on an application of this scale, there isn't any assessment of the viability. It's assessed, it's been put forward. It's obviously an investment for the people who are putting the application forward, but there isn't any requirement for them to showcase ongoing viability of the business.
So to add to that, then, the current use as a tourist, putting aside the proposed extension at the moment, the current use as a tourist facility, that is the permission they have in place for it to be a holiday accommodation. But as Councillor Edivine has suggested, I mean, who knows what might happen in the future? Then it might be, might be a request to turn it into a permanent residence, for example. If that was the case, though, would I be right in saying that an application would have to be made to the council to be able, if that was requested at some point, and then if and when that happened, the council would look at and debate and discuss at that particular time?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, if they wanted to change it to a residential C3 dwelling, they would be required to apply for planning permission at that point in time, and it would be assessed against the relevant policies. So the relevant greenbelt policies, the same as we're assessing against tonight, albeit there may be different considerations for conversion of a building to the extension of a building.
Thank you. So, and again, as ever with any planning application, you can never assume what might happen in the future. We can only look at what is before us today, which we're having quite a discussion about. So, so we've heard the main points. I don't see anyone else wishing. Oh, sorry. Did I forget to bring you in?
Well, I did say I wanted to refer to that question.
Sorry, yes, I did.
So I also had my hand up.
Sorry, yes, I did miss you. So I'm sorry, Councillor Manager, and then Councillor Barney. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Having looked at this site, one of my main concerns was that it might not be accessible, but I've just looked it up by public transport. I've just looked it up on Google Maps, and it's only 15 minutes walk from a bus stop, which is not too bad in my experience. There are a lot more worse places that are not served very well, and that's at 8 o'clock tonight. So, and the other thing is that, well, I mean, I think Mr. Bumble's quotation from Charles Dickens is appropriate here, because it's absolutely ridiculous that we're saying that what is relatively small building is not going to be allowed because of basically a technicality, when opposite there's a rural development in the form of a chicken farm. And I know we've had a lot of problems with chicken farms, and we've quite happily, although I wasn't part of it, given permission for that sort of thing. And most people could see that the damage to the green belt by a chicken farm is considerable and an absolute nuisance to people that live nearby, as opposed to an extension so that disabled people and people with additional needs can enjoy the countryside. And also, I'm in favour of the Wildlife Trust's idea that instead of having green belt, we need wild belt. And if you look at this site, it is in fact a little square of green amongst a huge great field that is presumably some sort of monoculture of something. So I do think that, and I'm quite prepared to propose that we accept this development, but I realise that we'd have to put conditions on this. So perhaps no further development would be one of them. And also, obviously, we have to have the construction and so on would have to be conditioned. But I think we could say that there are exceptional circumstances in this case, in that it will be contributing to the rural economy and also providing for the needs of disabled people and people with other additional needs. So,
okay, thank you. That's very clear. You've made a proposal there. We're making notes about it as we speak. This is a proposal counter to the recommendation on the report, which is basically you are proposing to grant permission, and but with conditions we would need to discuss and agree. I hear what you say about wild belts. I would suggest we mustn't get ourselves into the realms of legislation and policies that don't even exist yet. But I understand what you're saying there. But what we do have to remember is that we have to make a balanced judgment as with regards to the current legislation, both national, as in national planning policy framework, and indeed Rushcliffe Borough Council's own local policies. So those are the legal things and policies that we have to keep in mind. But I understand what you're saying about wild belts. You've made a proposal. I've still got another speaker to go, but have you? Is there a seconder at this stage for that proposal? Councillor Giorgio, you're wishing to formally second that Do you wish to add anything at this point, or just?
No, everything that Councillor Mallender said, I totally agree with.
Well, I can always let you come back later if you need to. Yes, Mr. Sharman.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, Councillor Mallender, in your recommendations, you found that it is inappropriate development, but you feel there are very special circumstances which outweigh the harm. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Thank you.
So that's affirmative. Councillor Bonney, please.
Yeah. I support your supposition there that the building lends itself incredibly well to disabled access holidays. I know that members of my own family who are a married couple with Down syndrome like to holiday once a year in a residence that is very much like this, and it allows their relatives to also stay on site but allow them a degree of privacy and separation. And I can see that this proposal supports that well. Also, with my adult social care hat on at Notts County Council, this is exactly the kind of accommodation that we'd be seeking to support. So with all of that, I feel supportive. However, I have a question. My only concern about this is the precedent factor, and I was slightly concerned that we were using other holiday parks in Greenbelt as examples of why this should be allowed to go ahead. I wouldn't want to see this as being in any way used as precedent going forward for future Greenbelt development. However, if it's in the Greenbelt, I presume that we would always consider on the merit, and the Greenbelt policy would kick in and protect us from this forming a precedent. Could you clarify that for me?
Important points there. Yes, if you could clarify, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so as a matter of course, every application must be considered on its own merits at that point in time and will be assessed against the relevant policies.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker, were you in? Did you want to come back, Councillor Walker?
I did, but Mrs. Not drew my it's in my eye line, so I noticed wondered whether or not
I didn't see the eye contact.
If planning permissions are granted here, what, if any, conditions could be used to ensure that the things that we've seen that make the proposed accommodation suitable for users with disabilities or special needs, actually goes ahead, rather than what's built being possibly altered via PD or other routes? I'd like to try and understand that before being asked to vote on it, if possible.
No, again, that's a very good question, and especially when we are looking at proposals being made to, in effect, go against a policy. So we need to be able to be clear on this. So, Mrs. Knott, could you just help us out with that, please?
Yes, thank you. I was going to touch on the conditions, so I'm glad I let you speak first. In terms of control, which I think is what you're talking about, there isn't any permitted development rights that this would have that I'm aware of that they could do changes to. But we, as planning, wouldn't have. We could condition that it's built in accordance with the plans, but they could do internal alterations, and that's not a planning matter, it's internal. So whilst we can control the building and how it's built and say in accordance with the plans, if at a later date they decided to change the internals, that we would have limited control on what that is. And just on the conditions that is part of the motion, we wouldn't be able to put a condition to say no more development, because any more development would need planning permission. So there's no need for that condition. It doesn't meet the tests. And I think the other one you mentioned was construction. Again, for a development of this size, I don't think it's necessary. But if you wanted to delegate the appropriate conditions to officers, we would be happy to do that.
Thank you, Mrs. Knott. Is that helpful, Councillor Walker? You're in deep thought, I can tell. So while you're in deep thought, I'll go to Councillor Thomas.
I think there are building standards for disabled accommodation, and could be conditioned that the accommodation conform to those standards when built and maintained to those standards going forward. Thank you.
Is that correct, Mrs. Knott?
So there's building regulations for certain types of things, but that falls into a different regulations other than planning. So we wouldn't condition something that would be required through building regulations. It wouldn't be, it's not through the same legislation, it wouldn't be appropriate. From off the top of my head, I can't think of a condition that we could say other than in accordance with the plans that would secure more, other than what would go down the building control route.
But to be clear, it's only am I right in my understanding that it's only effectively the external plans that, when you say in accordance with the plans, it's only externally, because I'm not trying to cast any aspersions on anybody, the applicant, but if they decided to build a third bedroom, or change a smaller toilet, or the circulation space going, as far as I can see, I don't think there's anything that is being proposed at the moment that we could do to ensure that. And in the back of our mind, I think we're being asked to grant the permission on the basis of that type of use. So it seems to be, unless I'm missing something, a bit of a misalignment.
Yes, please, Mrs. Knott.
Yeah, so we could say in accordance with the plans, and we could, if we got a complaint, we could go out and look at it. But there's nothing to stop them in the future doing any internal alterations, because planning doesn't control you could knock your wall through in your own house, and that's not a planning matter. So that's where I was trying to come from.
But you can have conditions on that make it clear that it is just for temporary or holiday let type of use, and can't be used for permanent use, and so on and so forth. So that could be brought in. Yes, Councillor Mander, I was going to bring you back in anyway, because you've made moved a proposal. So do you want to come back?
Yeah, I was just going to ask whether you could actually be specific about that its use is for people with disabilities and additional needs. And also, could we have a guidance about some of the external use? Because as has been said earlier, I can't remember who said it, it looks like gravel outside. Could there be some sort of guidance? I realise we can't insist on to make sure that access is. I have tried to look at the access statement, but it doesn't seem to mention anything about external groundwork. I know we've had guidance before about trees and so on, so I should have thought.
We can look at that. So do you want to come back on that one, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So the application doesn't propose any changes to the access or the hard standing. We can put informatives on there, but it doesn't do anything. It's just a suggestion. So if that's necessary or not, but there isn't any changes proposed to that gravel area or the access.
No, I realise that. I've looked at that, but like we quite often have informatives about not removing trees, and in this case we could have one not to remove the hedges. Not that I imagine anyone would want to, certainly in the near future, but certainly that sort of informative is quite helpful, I think, and I do realise it's only guidance. But if we could be specific that its use is only for what it has been asked for in the application.
So we can restrict the use for holiday lets, as the chair has suggested, but specifically for accessible only. That's not what's been applied for. It's been applied for the ability for people to use it as an accessible, but if that's not being booked, for example, by them, then other people could use it. So I think that condition would be too restrictive and to be put on this.
Well, I do realise that. I mean, I've occasionally used an accessible toilet when desperate. So yes, I do realise other people could use it too. But I was just wondering whether we could actually ask that it is kept so that it is possible for people with disabilities to use.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wells, did you want to come in on this?
I went out for a site visit on Sunday morning, and I did enter the property halfway down the gate, and the gravel is quite hard, and I do think a wheelchair user could get over it if somebody was pushing the person in the wheelchair.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Right, we're having quite a discussion about this, which is good, and that's what we're here for. I don't see anyone else wishing to speak. Does anyone else want to come in on this? So, no, I don't think there is. So we're in an interesting situation here where we've had the original recommendation is to refuse permission for the reasons shown in the report, but we now have a counter recommendation to grant permission along with conditions which and advisories that need to be agreed. So, yes, do you want to just?
Sorry, can I just clarify what the motion would include? Because there's been a discussion about different conditions and different informatives, and I made a suggestion that you could delegate it to officers, and we could, just to be clear before we vote, it would be helpful to understand what exactly the motion is, so we're not confused about that, if that's okay.
So would you like Councillor Mallender just to confirm? Yes. Yes, if you could just confirm the points, and then so the officers are clear as to what they will be putting in any potential report and conditions.
Well, the reason for the recommendation to give permission is that despite the size, there are very special circumstances in this case, in that it's going to improve the rural economy and also provide facilities for people in society who may not have those needs fulfilled. So for disabled people and people with additional needs in particular. And then the informatives are that the hedge is retained, and now that I've been informed by Councillor Wells that the gravel is quite hard, perhaps that is unnecessary then in that case. But
so any conditions, would you delegate that to officers?
Yeah, I delegate conditions to officers. Yeah. Solely holiday lets. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So are you clear and happy on that? So we okay. Right, thank you for that, Councillor Mallender. So Councillor Georgia, you seconded the proposal. Do you wish to add anything? No. Okay, right. So I think we better make a decision now. We've had a good discussion and debate. So we've got the revised recommendation to grant permission with advisories and conditions to grant permission to the applicant. Show of hands, please. Those in favour, please show. One, two, three, four. That's 8. Are those against? 1, 2, 3. 3 against. Okay. And for the record, any no abstentions? No. So right. So 8 votes in favour, 3 votes against. That means permission is granted for the application, along with the conditions and advisories that are to be detailed. Thank you. Can I just say that like us all, the Greenbelt is a very, very important part of national and local planning policy. It's vital, but as we have seen this evening, sometimes a council or a committee will agree that there are exceptional circumstances and reasons why you are in effect gone against various Greenbelt policies. It's not an easy decision to take, but that's one of the reasons why we have a planning committee, isn't it? Is to look at applications very carefully. So I appreciate this wasn't a unanimous vote; it was a majority vote. But I hope that colleagues who were not in support of it will understand the decision the committee has made and the reasons for it. So with that, I think we'll move on to we'll move on to the next item, which is I need to stand down for this, don't I? Because it's in my division, in my ward. So I will hand over to Councillor Wells.
Right. The next item is Rushcliffe Oaks, which is a crematorium at Cotgrave. It's a mile outside, and they wish to have a shipping container. So would the officer like to give his report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So members are advised that there is a late representation from Cotgrave Town Council stating no objection. The application seeks retrospective planning permission for the retention of a shipping container within the grounds of the Rushcliffe Oaks crematorium. It's located approximately a mile north of Cotgrave. So the application seeks retrospective planning permission on a temporary 5-year basis. The container is required for the storage of grounds maintenance equipment for the maintenance of the landscaping around the crematorium site. So the application relates to a container sited to the rear of the crematorium site. There is a public right-of-way to the south and the former mineral line to the east, which is in use now as a footpath and cycle path. The site falls within the green belt. I'm just going to run through some photos of the application site. So it's just a view of the crematorium from Main Road, from the frontage, and as you can see to the right-hand side, we've got the public right-of-way, which runs across the former mineral line. And then this is a view from the southeast corner, looking towards the shipping container, which you can just see in the distance. And then we've got a few views from the former mineral line itself. You can see there is hedgerow and tree screening. This was taken a couple of weeks ago, obviously with no leaf cover, so in the summer there would be considerably greater screening. And then just another view from the southeast corner. See there is a sort of mounded area and a solar array to the south. So as you can see, the container has very limited visual prominence within the surrounding landscape and from public vantage points, given its siting. And then just a close-up photo of the container itself. As you can see, there is the container sited to the rear of a storage compound. The enclosure of the compound exceeds the height of the container, so it effectively screens it from views from Main Road. So the site falls within the green belt, and as discussed previously, we have to consider the very special circumstances. In this case, the application does not fall within the exceptions listed under paragraphs 154 or 155 of the NPPF, and therefore it comprises an inappropriate and therefore harmful form of development. So therefore, we have to look at the very special circumstances and see whether these exist and whether they clearly outweigh the harm arising. So in this case, it's considered that there are a number of benefits arising from the scheme, from the retention of the container. It's used for the storage of maintenance equipment, for maintaining the landscaping of the site, for providing a pleasant and respectful setting for users of the site. The crematorium obviously provides an important local service, and maintaining the landscaping is a key part of this. The container provides an economic benefit by supporting a permanent post of a grounds maintenance position, and it avoids the need to transport equipment from the council depot to the site and back daily. It can be stored securely on site. So the container is sited on existing hard standing, and therefore it doesn't represent an encroachment onto, for instance, open countryside, open fields. And like I say, it is a temporary permission for a 5-year period. Oh, sorry, temporary permission is sought, sorry. And therefore, for the reasons set out, it's considered that there are a number of benefits which represent very special circumstances that would clearly outweigh the harm arising to the green belt and any other harms arising. And for this reason, the application is in front of you with a recommendation to grant planning permission subject to conditions.
Thank you very much. Right, the container is 6.1 metres long, 2.4 metres wide, 2.6 metres high. They want it for 5 years. Any question, Councillor? Yes.
I do find it a bit difficult to believe that we're proposing, Rushcliffe is proposing to put a container in the greenbelt rather than actually building something to put the equipment in. I take the point that there's a temporary need, but 5 years is a long time. And the fact that they're talking about painting it a particular colour so that it blends in and putting cladding on it so that it can't be seen, it doesn't look as though it's intended to be temporary while something is being built to me. So, I mean, I would support the recommendation, but reduce the timescale for the temporary building to 3 years, which is perfectly long enough to actually build something that would fit in with what is quite a sensitive location in terms of views from public footpaths and so on, and also in terms of the amenity of people using the crematorium. And a shipping container is not a good look, really. Thank you.
Any other councillor?
Just to say, I was at a funeral yesterday, so I did go and have a look at this. You can't see it at all. It is right behind the building, so it doesn't impinge at all on anybody using the facility for a funeral. So, yeah, it is temporary, and I think it's going to do a good job, so I see no reason to object to that.
Thank you. I must admit it is right at the back of the crematorium, so you would only see it if you went on the footpath, but there is a slight rise behind the solar panels. Anybody else, councillors?
Can I propose that we accept the recommendation as it stands? I don't think it needs to be reduced from 3 years to 5 years. I think, yeah, that gives some leeway. So I'm quite happy for it to go ahead.
Thank you for the proposal. Anybody second it?
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
So the proposal is to accept it, and it brings it down from 5 years to 3 years.
No.
It stays at 5.
Okay, can I call for a vote, please? All in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you. Against? 1. Thank you very much. The item's passed.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Right, we have one more item on tonight's agenda, and this is really for noting, but we can have a little discussion about it as well if we so wish. This is the report of recent appeals that have been heard, and you will see that we have two documents on here. We have a summary of some appeals, some of which have been allowed and some have been dismissed, and therefore the information, if anyone has any questions on those, feel free to ask. But the other part of this report is information about an appeal that was successful against a decision made by this committee quite a little while ago now. It was actually the previous committee. It was before last year's election, although I realise there are some members of this committee who were on that committee then. And this was at Chestnut Farm, Chestnut Lane, Barton in Fabis. And the report, there's quite a useful report here for us all, and I think we're going to hear a little bit about it. The upshot of it was that there had been an outline permission in place already for development to take place there. The full application came in for decision by the committee, but the committee on that occasion went against recommendation. The applicant appealed, and the appeal has been won. So permission is granted, but there are other consequences, shall we say, of that, not least of which is cost. But Mrs. Dodd, would you like, I hope I've not said everything you've got to say. I suspect I might have done, but I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Chairman.
But perhaps if you'd like to just add meat to the points we're making, please.
Thank you, Chairman. You have made most of the points I was going to make, but that's fine. So we do always note appeals, and sometimes I draw your attention to them, usually because we've had a good win and I like to share that with you. In this case, it's the opposite has happened. So we have lost the appeal, but we've also had some costs awarded. So I just wanted to draw it to your attention because it's a good thing to look at. As Chairman said, it was the previous committee that made that decision. So you haven't gone through this process yet of having anything with an appeal and a costs award. So it's useful just to note what can happen. So in this case, there's things that we can learn as officers and things that members can take away from it as well. So the inspector did disagree with the committee's decision to allow it. So we had the appeal dismissed, but importantly, he also noted that the council acted unreasonably in coming to that decision. So if you want to go away and have a look at page 32 later on, it's clearly set out there that he felt the council didn't have a reasonable planning basis for that decision and that we made a vague and generalised reason for refusal. And they're the two key points I wanted to just touch on, which really is just to demonstrate why in committee, as officers, we will always try and give you our best advice and steer you to a decision that we think we can defend. So sometimes it might feel like we're pushing you a little bit on reasons or being precise, but all we're trying to do is avoid that situation where we might lose an appeal, and if we do lose it, we might get a costs award. So it's really just to help to understand that process. And if you have got any questions, please feel free to ask me now or after the meeting. It's fine.
Councillor Walker and then Councillor Thomas.
Two things, if I may, Chair. Firstly, in terms of kind of learnings for officers and committee, it's an application that I'm familiar with by virtue of being the ward member. And one of the things that was particularly distinctive from my perspective was that as you rightly identify, the application first came before the committee as an outline application. And what was discussed at that meeting were matters primarily centred around the green belt and the extent to which the application constituted limited infill and other factors. At that stage, indicative plans were produced and put in front of the committee, showing a sort of farmyard, courtyard style development. And having been in the committee and addressed the committee on that evening, I think it's not unreasonable of me to say that those indicative plans influenced the committee heavily in their decision about whether or not the development was in principle acceptable in that location. Fine, don't like losing, but lost that argument, fine. when the application came back before the committee, when it was resubmitted as a full application, gone were all of those elements which, in my view, had convinced the committee that it was acceptable in principle. It's completely different style. And in considering that, at various stages, all the professionals said to us, that, oh well, that doesn't matter because they've, you know, the principle's now established, so it doesn't really matter that it's not like how we thought it was going to be. And that left a particularly sour taste in the mouth because we all felt that we'd been, to use a modern turn of phrase, baited and switched, or there'd been some bait and switch going on. So I think I'd just like to verbalise that there's a lesson for all of us in situations like that of tying the future reserve matters applications to indicative, more closely to the indicative plans, so that we don't end up. I have absolutely no doubt that if the eventually permitted scheme was presented outline or of reserve matters, the result would have been the same. And it's, you know, it's because of the way that the system was gamed, in my opinion. Now that's fine. That's, you know, that people are entitled to do that. But the takeaway has to be tying the outline permission more closely to reserve matters, so that doesn't happen again. Sorry, I know that was a long point, but I wanted to get that off my chest, and you perhaps foolishly gave me the opportunity to do that. Secondly, and this is a drum that I've banged unsuccessfully in the past before, it seems bonkers to me that you know, sometimes in committee, like this evening, when the committee end up going against officer recommendation in any in either direction, that for that short 10 or 15 minute period, as councillors, we're totally on our own, without professional advice. Now I know we have the professional advice, and it comes with a recommendation for officers. But you know, after the decision is made, and that becomes the decision of the council, and it goes to appeal like this, we have another officer from the department defending the decision of council. Now we've heard before about, oh well, it's professional ethics, and you know, and I get that, but 10 minutes after the meeting, we get the support of the officers. It's only in that tiny bit where we don't. And I think we really ought to find some way of the committee being supported during that period, because the kind of the professional ethics bit doesn't really hold up in light of what happens after the meetings. I'm not saying I know what it looks like, but I think if the committee on that day had that kind of support, then it would be much more unlikely that an inspector would have found that we were vague, and the committee was vague, and you know, ended up with that cost. So perhaps I would ask you to go on. I do no more than ask you to go away and think about that, about, you know, how we could be supported and not left on our own on the occasions where the committee come to a different conclusion than the officer had.
Thank you. Yeah, points noted. I think the committee had its reasons for coming to the decision it did, but as we heard at the earlier application this evening, the committee is coming to, or some members of the committee are coming to a suggestion that is going against the recommendation. The officers do engage, and they do ask committee just what it is that we're particularly commenting about and concerned about, and we've had that this evening. I think that would have happened. I'm sure it happened at that application, but perhaps we as a committee just need to be absolutely sure what it is that we are asking for and pointing out, and then during that 10 minutes or whatever it is, confirming with the officers, as I think we have done this evening on the earlier application, that are the officers clear as to the precise reasons as to why a committee looks as if it's going to make a decision that is against the original recommendation. The ethics are very important because, and I have every faith in the officers on this, because yes, the planning professionals will have suggested one decision. We, as committee members, have made a different decision. But then, as you rightly say, that then is the decision of the committee and the council, and the officers do go off and present that and defend it. But do you want to come in and just help us out on this from your side of things, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in terms of that professional ethics, I do feel like I need to cover it because I don't want to get people confused or thinking that officers are just doing as they're told. The people who are sat at committee don't defend it because that's their professional opinion. So you'll never find someone telling you one thing one day and then 10 minutes having a different decision. We go back to the office, discuss it with our officers, and if we have an officer that agrees with what committee says and feels they can defend it, they will. There have been instances, and there possibly will be instances in the future where we haven't got an officer that feels that they can defend it with their professional ethics. So we would get someone in to defend the council to do that. So it's not we disagree with you and 10 minutes later we don't. We use different officers and to defend it. I just feel like I need to make that point too.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, I had a point really and a question. I think the point is that the reasons for refusal are so important when it comes to an appeal, and I think that obviously they're very carefully crafted when officers are recommending refusal, but they're less carefully well, there's less time spent on them when the committee does it, and it's the whole process that goes on to capture what was said in the meeting and what the reasons for refusal are over and above the recommendation to go against the officers. And it's that part of it, as has been done tonight, to give the officers scope to go away and actually capture the whole of the discussion and all the reasons for refusal in enough detail to be able to defend an appeal, and to allow people like the ward member to present all the points that they've made, and not have any of them ruled out because they're not in the reasons for refusal. And this has happened to me as ward member. The reasons for refusal have been articulated in the discussion, but not encapsulated necessarily in the recommendation. When somebody says recommend that we refuse it, then, and they're not actually nailed down at that point, and that needs to happen. So that was the point really. And the question is, you might not be able to or willing to answer, is of what order of magnitude are the costs in this case?
I don't think we know yet, do we? I don't think that's been decided.
No, so the next step would be for the appellant to submit their cost claim. It was written representations. There were no additional technical consultations, so it will be the cost of the time of the planning agent that wrote the appeal statement. But we can report that back at a later date if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's quite important to understand because this was written representations. It could have been hearing. We've got hearing coming up and or inquiry, and those are going to be much more. And so I think probably we all need to have in our mind, what those figures are really. Thank you.
Thank you. And the point that Councillor Walker made about sort of the difference between an outline application and the actual application that comes in. I suspect you'll tell us that the situation is that an outline permission is granting just that. It's granting the what's the word I'm looking for here? The principle of development, but of course the full application comes in, and then that's the actual application we're discussing, isn't it, at the time? But that's the way the rules work, isn't it? Or do you just want to help us and confirm that, please?
it's not, sometimes you can define the parameters of an outline application, but generally it's the larger ones. You have something called parameter plans, and you can condition certain things. But in an outline application, dependent on what, they could ask for everything to be reserved at a later date, or they can show different pieces. It depends on what type of outline application as to what we can condition. But generally, you wouldn't condition plans except, you know, a red outline perhaps, but because it's outlining, you wouldn't want to restrict anything moving forward, because the converse side of it is you say, oh, I like the look of this, let's say it has to be in accordance with it, but they could do better, but we wouldn't be able to approve that because I'm not trying to be, I'm just trying to give you both sides of the story. So we do need to be careful if we're thinking about that, and generally you can't, because that the applicant isn't applying for that, and we would be unreasonable to condition something along those lines. But if there is something on a larger site and you want parameter plans, it's something we can look at, but it's only if the applicant is looking to achieve something like that. So sorry, it wasn't as straightforward as maybe we hoped.
Rarely, I think, straightforward in the world of planning. Let's be honest; it is quite a complicated beast. But there we are. It is what it is. It's whether time will go on, whether we find ourselves in a situation like that again. But it's important, I think, that we are made aware of appeal decisions like this, because well, we need to know, don't we? As indeed all the other interested parties are as well. So. With that, I don't think there's anything else to add unless anyone wishes to make any other comments. So thank you for your attendance. We'll bring the meeting to a close at 7:28. So thank you very much.